your website is not the only destination for discovery anymore. I think in 2026, you should stop optimizing exclusively for the click and the traffic and start to optimize for discovery and meet your audience in the platforms where they are already spending their time. Because if you are not, your competitors will, and you will lose the top of mind place. I'm Sara Warneryd, and this is SEO in 2026 Additional Insights.
Sarah, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
I feel like we as SEOers need to broaden our strategy a bit. I want us to see search as something broader and more of a discovery channel and not just focusing on the website, as I feel like we have been doing for many years. The user buyer journey is now more fragmented than it has been before. We have new social channels emerging, we have the LLMs, we have so many new ways of interacting with the web. And I feel like we need to be in those places where your audience actually spends time. Basically, what I want us to do is to be a part of the wider discussions that you have within the organization. I want us to be a part of discussion with PR, with brand, with social channels, and start unifying the strategy across the organization, ensuring that we are optimizing for the places where the relevant target audience spends their time and not only doing a one-fit-all strategy like we've been used to optimizing for the historical or traditional blue links on Google.
Absolutely. I remember, I think, for the Majestic, I think it was an SEO in 2025 series, I was contemplating changing the name of SEO to ODO, Organic Discovery Optimization, where you're giving consumers different platforms on which they will discover you, and you're trying to optimize for those platforms, which isn't, of course, just Google, but we're still talking about organic search, but not necessarily even search. It's organic discovery. It's discovering a brand. Should I be revisiting that conversation, or does that not really cover everything that you're talking about?
I like it a lot, so I agree with that approach. And I feel like it's so important to have this shift of mindset, because I feel like a lot of the times it gets forgotten. Like a lot of the discussions I have with SEO, I work at an agency, so I'm a consultant for different clients. And I feel like many people believe that SEO is just this simple task where you optimize headings and meta description, but we have to remember that it's broader, and especially in this new era of search that we're in. We see that, like, first of all, zero-click searches are emerging. Like, it is a fact that we will probably see less and less traffic coming in to your site. But that doesn't mean that people is not doing the research still. People are still like discussing your topic somewhere. We just need to ensure that we are active on those places where the audience actually spends their time. And that can be like different depending on what industry you're in. Like if you're in B2B, those areas might be Capterra, G2, like review platforms. It can be LinkedIn, of course. If you're in B2C, that could mean that your audience is doing their research on TikTok or Instagram or more visual places. In general, Reddit is a forum that we see is emerging a lot in search results and how it's influencing LLMs. So I feel like there's just so many new touch points that the customer goes through in order to make a decision. And we need to ensure that we are spending our efforts where it actually matters. And that is not a one-size-fits-all solution anymore.
And that leads me to three different questions. First of all, what platform do we optimize for? I.e., how do we know which platforms our consumers, our target customers are more likely to interact on? How do we optimize for those platforms? And how do we measure the impact of optimizing for those platforms if we don't get traffic as a result of that? So shall we go to the first one? How do we actually decide on which platform we select to optimize for?
Yes, let's start with the first one. There are tools today where you can actually get these type of insights. So you can use audience research tools. I know SparkToro has that kind of feature if you're in the US market. There are also other audience research tools where you can actually build your target groups and your audiences and get insights on where they spend time. And to see, especially what I think is relevant, is to see what platforms they spend the most time on. So you can get insights if the majority of your audience spends time on YouTube. Maybe that's where you should focus the strategy. Or if it's LinkedIn, that's where you should go. So you can get those kind of insights there. Another way of doing it, if you don't have access to these type of tools, I would do it in a more like manual way that maybe not as reliable, but it can still give some good insights. And that is that I would do a traditional search in Google for the topics you want to be visible at and take a look at what kind of search results is showing up. Is it a Reddit forum showing up in the Google thread? Is it a TikTok video? Is it a YouTube series? Because that really gives you insights on what kind of places the audience goes to and also what Google's is thinking is relevant for this type of topic. First of all, it can indicate that you should probably have a multimodal strategy and be on those platforms and engage it on your landing pages, on your website. But it can also be that you should engage on these specific platforms. So if you see that Reddit forums is in the search result, you should probably have a strategy to monitor and be a part of that discussion. If you see that it's a YouTube video showing up, how are you working with that actively? And I feel like this is now our chance as SEOers to educate within this topic and be a part of the wider discussions, as I said in the beginning, because I feel like coming from a background within SEO, we have a certain way to look at things, like knowing the algorithms, knowing how to optimize, and maybe a different mindset than people in brand and social and these type of other teams have. So if we come together and do a combined unified strategy, I think that is how we can really go for success.
But it's interesting that you started off that recommendation with start searching Google when we don't necessarily know, I guess, that our target audience are all going to be searching Google to begin with, because Google are obviously bringing up results that they've decided to optimize for. You mentioned Reddit. Reddit have a partnership or have had a partnership with Google and are more likely to appear in Google perhaps than other search engines. So how do we know that our target audience is likely to be searching Google rather than using maybe some other AI search?
No, that is something we can't really know. And like nowadays with the era of AI, we are lacking data in a lot of these things. But I would still say that Google is always trying to meet the intent of the user. That's the aim of the game with traditional SEO. So we can still give an indication of what they believe is the most important format to present for this type of search. And that still gives an indication. I would still say using real tools to really understand your audience is the best. But if you don't have that at your disposal, this can be a good enough place to start. I would also say if you have LLM tracking tools in place, such as Profound or Peak or anything like that, they also give some good insights on what kind of domains influence your industry in how LLMs talk about you. So this is also somewhere where you can get signals of where to put your efforts. We see, for example, that Reddit is something that gets cited a lot across majority of industries. We see, I mentioned G2 and Capterra for B2B companies before. That is also something we see heavily impact how LLMs talk about B2B companies. We also see that YouTube is something that gets heavily cited. And what's interesting here is that it's most of the time not the company's content that gets cited within YouTube. It's actually let's say someone is prompting for, I want the best hiking pants for my upcoming hike. We see that they are not most of the time choosing a company video to showcase this result. They are actually showcasing users testing hiking pants so they get an answer they can trust. So here it's also interesting for companies how they split the efforts between what content do we produce ourselves and how do we, in an organic way, do partnerships with influencers that are relevant for the industry. So I think there are different ways how you can tackle it.
Yeah, you touched on content there. Obviously, we were talking about how you go about selecting whichever platform you decide to focus on. Then you started talking about user-generated content there as well. So is by analyzing search results actually how you go about choosing the type of content that you choose to produce for each medium?
Yes, that is a part of my natural research process when I'm doing briefs for clients. And now I luckily have all the tools that I've been describing at my disposal, so I can do a deeper dive into where I want to put my efforts. But I always do a Google search to see what kind of intent do we have for this topic. And that gives me an indication of how I want to form the strategy and what kind of medium we should target. Is it a video? Then I'm having a discussion with the team at my client who's producing videos and I feel the last couple of years that has shifted a lot because I never was a part of those conversations before, whilst now we have the opportunity to. And I feel that's also why SEO is becoming more fun, because we can now tackle it from so many new ways.
And if you, as you're conducting the research, you find so many different opportunities in terms of channel types, how do you drill down and perhaps select the top 3 that are likely to be most suitable?
I do it, first of all, by looking at the data. If I look, for example, in tools like Profound, where we see that some domains heavily influences AI search and gets cited, then we have it. Like, the data speaks for itself. That's where we should put our efforts. But it also needs to be in a close dialogue with the client to see what's actually possible to do. So then it's about prioritization. Because this whole mindset, what I want to achieve with this talk and my tip is to not spend the effort where it doesn't matter. So we don't want to produce strategies that the client won't be able to implement anyway. So we need to have a close dialogue with them because it's all about bringing value at the end.
Got you, okay. And let's touch on measurement as well, because as we've touched upon, users interact directly at source where they're consuming the content and don't necessarily visit the website until they've made that purchase decision. So how do you therefore go about measuring the direct impact of each source on which the user discovers your content?
This is a tough one, as I also described quite a few alternatives on how to approach it. There are also different ways to measure it. But here, a natural thing to look at would be organic following and engagement in the social channels where you decide to actually optimize and create content. So if you do create a YouTube channel, we of course want to see the engagement and the following going up. Another thing you can do is, again, use the toolkit I've been describing. We can see, if we try to optimize for AI search, we can see if our share of voice is growing by doing these type of efforts. So that is also a way. But I believe something that I want to emphasize more with my clients going forward is to have some sort of questionnaire where they actually send out a form to their clients to ask, how did you hear about us? Because then we can get it in print that they actually found us on a YouTube, or we read about you in a Reddit thread, or whatever it can be. So then they get more data on how people actually find you. Because like you said or hinted at, it is hard of knowing where a user is coming from today.
Yeah, you're not the first person to actually talk about the importance of asking the question and the time of purchase. Where did you actually hear of us? What influenced your purchase decision? And that's great information to get, but it often doesn't tell the full picture. People perhaps will just remember the last referring source and not what influenced them to begin with. So it's very difficult to decide what really assisted along the way. Do you attempt to use some kind of multi-attribution system where you're actually giving value to each stage of the journey, or is that just too complicated to do nowadays, too difficult? You don't have the data to do that?
I think there are solutions to do that, definitely, but it's not something I have been exploring that much in this era we're in now. But I would more look at it at the data we actually have available and not make it too complicated for the client as well. So just try to keep the metrics clean and easily understandable, while also understanding that the end point is not about just tracking metrics, but will it bring value at the end? And I feel like it is a tough question you're asking on how to actually measure it. But the bigger question is that if we are not doing it, the audience is discussing your product somewhere, and if we're not there, your competitor most likely will. So that is still an argument on why you should do it. But I would urge the client to do research before on what platforms are the most relevant, so we know that we're tackling it from the right angle.
And are you able to give the listener maybe a little bit of a start in terms of what platforms are more likely to be suitable for them depending on their industry? I mean, for example, using the channels Reddit, TikTok, YouTube, is there a particular type of business that is more likely to have its customers resonate with their content on one of those platforms?
Yes, I can take examples from clients I'm working with. In the travel industry, we see that niche forums are actually a big deal that we haven't seen before. So there we are creating strategies on how we should be a part of those discussions. And it also gives us insights. What kind of topics are they discussing in these forums, and can we create that content as well? So we are analyzing what kind of problems do our audience have and how do we answer that. So that is for the travel industry. For another client I have that is in outdoor segment within fashion, we saw, like I mentioned earlier before, that YouTube is somewhere that people are spending the time to do their research. So now we're conducting a YouTube strategy. And like I said, it is the mix between creating content themselves, like guides on what to pack, what to do, how do you prepare for hiking. But then it's also with partnering up with other relevant UGC creators. And then for a fashion client, we see that TikTok is the place to spend the time, because that is where, at least for that client, the majority of the audience is doing their research and gaining inspiration. So then it becomes a collaborative process between the SEO team and the social team for the different type of clients.
I love those specific examples there. That certainly resonated with me. One industry that I used to work in is a prepaid currency card. And because that applied in particular to the travel industry, people using that product when they're abroad, a massive referring source was actually Disney forums. People talking about what to do in various Disney parks. And people happened to recommend the product within there as well. And it provided a phenomenal source of traffic and high conversion rates as well. So find your correct, most relevant niche forum talking about your industry segment, and that can be gold to you.
That's so fun. And I feel like, now you said that you've done this historically, but at least for me, these are new discussions we are having, because before I did not discuss with my clients on what kind of Reddit strategy they should have, or like what kind of niche forums should we be a part of. So this is something new that is emerging, and I feel that as the landscape is shifting, and it just gives so much opportunity, and it also indicates that SEO is moving more towards branding in general and not only isolated tactics on your website.
Sarah, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
Well, how do I summarize this in a good way? Your website is not the only destination for discovery anymore. I think in 2026, you should stop optimizing exclusively for the click and the traffic and start to optimize for discovery and meet your audience in the platforms where they are already spending their time. Because if you are not, your competitors will, and you will lose the top of mind place.
Sara Warneryd is Senior SEO and AEO Strategist at Pracies. Find out more over at pracies.com. Sara, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thank you so much.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at SEOin2026.com.